Hello and welcome in to Addison to 35th podcast, the inaugural episode. My name is Herb Lawrence. You can find me on Twitter, X, whatever it's called now, at Ecknerwall23. And my co-host for today and all season long is Ryan Herrera. You can follow him on X at Ryan_A_Herrera. This is being our first episode. We want to definitely make sure that you guys know who we are and what we're going to be doing. We'll be having topics about the offseason of both of the shows, the Cubs and the White Sox. Ryan has covered the Cubs for the last 3 years for CHGO Cubs. Myself, I've covered the White Sox for the last 3 years for CHGO White Sox. So we'll be talking about their offseason moves they had this year. And also what you can expect from these different shows. Because, yes, Ryan and I are together today. But this will be a very rare sight unless Cubs and Sox are playing or there's some Cubs-Sox crossover news. We will both be having individual shows. I'll be doing the Sox side. Ryan will be doing the Cubs side. One show per side of town per week for you guys out there. But before we get started with all that other stuff, let's say hello to Ryan Herrera and let Ryan tell you who exactly he is.
Hey, what's up, Herb? It's good to be back on a podcast with you here, Herb.
Feels so good.
It's been a second, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Ryan Herb, like you said it. I've covered baseball for this would be 5th season, 2021. I was with MLB.com in the last 3 seasons. I was with CHGO with you, Herb. You were Sox, I was Cubs, but we worked a lot together, around each other a lot, and now we're connected right here, Addison to 35th on Just Baseball, and it's going to be awesome. Obviously, both of us like huge just baseball in general, but obviously very into you're on the Sox side. I'm on the Cubs side. I think at our last place, what we did worked really well. But now we're here. And like you said, like right now, first starting out, a little bit of a combined Cubs Sox experience for this first episode. But it is going to be interesting kind of taking this solo in a way, right? Like you hosting your Sox shows, me hosting Cubs shows. And seeing how that works out. But I'm excited, man. It's like I said, it's been a couple months since we were doing this every day, and we won't do it every day, but we'll be trying to do these as often as possible. And I'm looking forward to seeing just kind of how this evolves, how this grows, because I'm excited to get back going into the podcast game.
Yeah, and just like you, I've been covering the White Sox pretty much on a daily basis for the last 5 years through podcasts. First, I started on Locked On Sox, myself and Chris Tannehill. Then I transitioned over to Chicago, the CHGO White Sox, but I've been in Chicago sports since 2000. I'm old man, so I was working at the Score for such a long time, and I love the folks over there. But these White Sox, they confuse me. They make me mad. They make me angry, but I can never quit them. Yes, they lost 121 games last year, the most in MLB history or modern MLB history. But you know what? As we'll get to the offseason spring notes, there's a renewed energy, of course, because you miss baseball. We've missed baseball all offseason, even though you cover a bad team in the White Sox and the Cubs. I think on my side of town, looking from the outside in, have underachieved the last couple of years, especially under Jed Hoyer, who has never been to the playoffs as the head man of the Chicago Cubs. But guess what? It is March now, guys, March 3rd to be exact. We are both excited about covering our prospective teams, and we will have a good time doing both of these podcasts, individual podcasts for you. My shows will be coming up usually on Sunday nights during, a recap of that weekend's action after the White Sox will lose to some team 2 out of 3 or get swept, but they'll look good. I think Ryan will be doing a show himself, just by himself, the same in the same atmosphere, but that's what I'm looking forward to, just the conversation with other White Sox fans. We'll be getting on our fellow Just Baseball colleagues, Jack McMullen, who just took the job down there with the Miami Marlins. I can't believe,
Radio, yeah.
Miami Marlins radio. I just talked to him in December, like you, and I was like, yeah, Jack, eventually you'll be a major league play-by-play guy. 3 months later, he is that guy. So him helping us out was a big thing, and he'll be coming up because I think in May the Marlins will be coming up here to Chicago to play both the Cubs and the White Sox. So he'll help both Ryan and us out with a nice in-depth breakdowns of what the Marlins can do and their matchups versus our prospective teams. And of course, on my side, Elijah Evans, who is a big-time White Sox prospects guy. He'll be joining me at least once a month to break down the White Sox, because that's what this year's about, and then probably the next couple of years. Not the people on the field. It'll be more on the people at AAA and AA. And Ryan, I know you'll be having some people on, like Aaron Layton, who is the minor league guy down there for most of the league. I worked with him back at the Locked On days. But guys like Matt Shaw, who are going to start the year probably with the Cubs, the Cubs have a bunch of those guys. Still have a big-time farm system, even though they have a contender in the NL Central.
Yeah, no, and I from my side, I plan to get, I plan to dip into the Chicago media market as well. Obviously, we got our Just Baseball guys. We got a lot of friends around the Chicago market. Sox fans, Cubs fans, Sox writers, Sox podcasters, whatever, Cubs writers, Cubs podcasters, and all that. So my goal is to get a lot of our friends around Chicago hopping on here, talking Cubs, obviously talking Sox with you. I think that's something that we enjoyed doing back in the CHGO days, was just kind of working with and alongside a lot of the other people covering these two teams around Chicago. That's my goal. That's my goal, is to get a lot of our friends on the show talking baseball in general, but definitely Cubs and Sox. I think that's going to add something to this show, and that's, again, it's like is constantly going to be an evolving show. We're going to take feedback from the people that are listening and watching on YouTube and tweeting at us and stuff like that, what they want to hear, what they don't want to hear, who they want on, who they don't want to have on. So if you got any of that kind of stuff, like, feel free to reach out to me and her with any feedback, because we want to make this thing great, and the only way we could do that is by having the people, the listeners, the viewers, reaching out and telling us what they want us to be doing on these shows. That's going to be really helpful for us too.
And as Ryan just said, it's interactive. You're going to be the person that we're going to be listening to. No feedback is unwarranted unless you come disrespectful. You can have disagreements with those folks, but come with some cordial.
Yeah.
Come like you're talking to another adult in their face. So we are definitely open to some suggestions. We have some good shows planned already for the rest of the month of March and April. But in between there, send a text to, or send a DM to me at Ecknerwall23 on Twitter, or Ryan at Ryan_A_Herrera. They're at X there too. And like you said, we will be very interactive with everybody out there, and have your favorite guest in the Chicago media landscape talking about these two teams. But let's get into these two teams. I'm very excited. As a person who is a White Sox fan, I always get asked, do you hate the Cubs? Because it's like a White Sox rite of passage. As you're a fan, you're the second team in the second city. Of course, the Cubs. And I told people when I moved to San Diego, the breakdown should be like 65-35 if I was being generous. It's more like 70-30 as Cubs fans to White Sox fans in this town. And that's for a multitude of reasons. But fans in this town should be very excited by the Cubs and what they've done and what you should expect from the Cubs this season. Ryan, what do you think is going to be happening this year with the 2025 Cubs, who are the prohibitive favorite in the NL Central?
Yeah, I think that's it right there. I think the expectation should be playoffs. This team is coming off back-to-back 83-win seasons. 2 years ago, we're a game or 2 wins or whatever it was away from making the playoffs. Last season, we're a little further behind, but it's clearly disappointing for Cubs fans, for the Cubs themselves, was to not make the playoffs the last 2 years when they were knocking on that door, and they've made additions over the last couple of years. The Dansby Swanson, obviously, a couple of years ago was a big one. Adding Kyle Tucker going into this season, this should be huge. Wow. But you have prospect. You mentioned the prospects, like P. Armstrong came on in the last 2 months or so of the season last year and looked a lot more like a guy who's figuring it out at the major league level. They got the stalwarts like Ian Happ's been around forever. It feels like he's 3 straight Gold Gloves, I want to say, in left field, and he's an all-star. He's been you look at his numbers, consistent as heck the last 3 years. Like, that's a guy that's going to be big for him. Seiya Suzuki, the expectation obviously is that he'll be mostly a DH going into this, for this season. Obviously, injuries and things can change how Craig Counsell writes out his lineups every day. But Seiya Suzuki has had his moments and honestly his extended stretches where he looks like one of the better hitters in baseball. So that's a big bat potentially in the middle of the order for him. But yeah, I mean, this Cubs team is, I think it's a good team. I think it looks like a good team. It doesn't look like a World Series team right now, in my opinion, but it looks like a good team, a team good enough to make the playoffs. You look at like the Brewers. We say it every year. The Brewers are going to take a step back. Obviously, I think they won 93 games last season. But you do have the expectation again that they might take a step back. The Cardinals are, I believe that they've kind of said it or made it known that they're going to be losing on purpose here for a little bit. Mm-hmm. The Pirates have some good young players, but I don't think they're quite at that level yet. And the Reds might be the Cubs' biggest competition in the Central. They feel like an up and coming team with a bunch of good young players. But I do think, like you said, the Cubs are probably when you look at the projection systems, the Cubs are the favorites for a bunch of different projection systems in the NL Central. I do think playoffs should be the expectation. It's Jed Hoyer's last year under contract. They got a lot of players. They might only have Kyle Tucker for 1 year. Some of these guys they've added. Ryan Presley is another guy. I believe his contract's up after this year, if I'm not mistaken. They have. It's not necessarily a win now team. They haven't done a whole bunch of win now things, but they have done some. And like the Kyle Tucker one is the biggest one of all of them, where he might be gone after this next season. You want to win with this guy on your roster. This guy can help you win. And I think Jed Hoyer has done has made some good additions this offseason to put a solid roster together. Again, it's not, you don't look at that and compare it to the Dodgers and say this Cubs team for sure can beat the Dodgers in the NLCS or something like that, right? Like, I think this Cubs team has work to do. They have some things to prove, but they do have a good team. They'll be putting a good team on the field in 2025, and I do think playoffs should be the expectation for fans, for the front office, for the players, for the coaches, like everyone involved. Playoffs should be the expectation this year, because not making the playoffs again would feel like a really bad thing if they don't do it this year.
Yeah, the Cubs are the bully. It should be the bully in the NL Central. They have the most money. They have the biggest crowds. They have, I think, the best talent by far. You went down the whole lineup. And adding Kyle Tucker, a top 10 player in my estimation, top 10 hitter in my estimation. He can run the bases very well, plays the right field almost flawlessly. He is going to turn 29 next year and be a free agent. And you said 1 year left. He's going to be demanding some big-time money. Yeah. You see the deal for Juan Soto. I don't think he's in that realm because of Juan Soto's 26. Kyle Tucker will be 29. Those 3 years do matter. But he should be in that echelon where he should be making a contract that is over $400 million. Agree or disagree?
I think, I'm not the best at like projecting contracts and stuff like that, but with the age, the pedigree, the play, and you kind of just look at what other people around the league have said, like 400 feels like a pretty solid number, if not higher, for what Kyle Tucker could command on this market. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was a coup. The fact that Jed and Carter Hawkins got him for 1 year. I know it's 1 year. Just giving up Paredes, who was kind of a failure here and would have been a failure here because the Cubs left field is not that, forgiving for players who are trying to hit home runs down the left field line like Paredes is most wanted to do. That's why he had success in Tampa. That's why he'll probably hit 30 home runs down there, the Crawford boxes, because it perfectly fits his swing. But they didn't give up that much to get this great player, if I'm correct, right?
Well, the biggest, so it was Isaac Paredes, Hayden Wesneski, who was the guy they got, was it 2022 deadline or right around there for Scott Efros. A guy they had hopes for, didn't really put it all together, but had his flash. I mean, the biggest piece is probably Cam Smith. Having talked to, Houston Astros, like a beat writer for The Athletic, Chandler Rome, talking about like that Cam Smith pretty much immediately became the Astros' top prospect when he moved into that system. He could have been the Cubs' third baseman of the future. That was always a possibility. I don't know where he is on some of these top 100 lists, but I believe he's on most of them, if not all of them. That was probably the big piece that they ended up giving up, even though Isaac Paredes is a former All-Star. Cam Smith's ceiling is probably higher. But yeah, to your point, like it felt like a trade where you're like, this could feel like it hurts the Cubs in the future, depending on what Cam Smith does. But like when you have the opportunity to go get Kyle Tucker, you go out and you get Kyle Tucker, especially when you're in the position the Cubs were in this offseason going into this season. You go out and get Kyle Tucker and kind of worry about what the top prospect does later on if it ever even comes to that. I think it was a good trade for both sides. And I think that again, like I said, that makes it more imperative to go and make the playoffs this year because you added Kyle Tucker, who could potentially leave after this year.
It'll be exciting times at the north side. They're starting the year early in Japan versus the reigning champion LA Dodgers, which Shota Imanaga will be pitching in his hometown or his home country there on March 18th and 19th this month.
Yes, yeah, coming just about 2 weeks from now. Yeah, they're leaving on March 11th. They'll be down, I believe, in Japan, or they're heading to Japan then. And they'll be down there for like a week or so. But yeah, we're getting close to some regular season games here. Like, baseball's sneaking up on us.
Yeah, I'm not even a Cub fan. I'm waking up those days to watch some Cub action. And of course, the LA Dodgers are the best team in baseball. Will probably win another world championship because they are relentless in their pursuit to get every player that is valuable. Now, the team that is not trying to get every player that is valuable in baseball, my team, the Chicago White Sox. They lost.
In fact, they're trading some of the more valuable players in baseball, or trying to at least.
Yeah, and the team in your division, which I thought the perfect matchup for Luis Robert Jr., who's still a White Sox and hitting the ball really hard down there in Arizona, which he didn't do last year in spring training, is the Cincinnati Reds. The same reason why I think you just said that the Cubs kind of got to push all in on this year, and it's got to kind of be a thing because of Kyle Tucker, because of Jed's contract status, et cetera, they just went and got Tito Francona. And Tito Francona didn't come here to finish second or third in the NL Central and then waste away his last couple years as being a major league manager just to be 500 with the Reds and lose and get fired 4 years from now. I thought that the Reds ownership would say, hey, we follow up this aggressive move with another aggressive move and getting a right center fielder. They can move him right if they wanted to. And Luis Robert Jr., who's still only, I think, 28 years old. He's got one more year on his contract. He's 27 years old. I'm going to turn 28 this year. One more year in his contract with 2 club option years after, which are only $20 million each of those years. And that wouldn't break the bank. That would be a perfect signing for the Cincinnati Reds, trade and signing for the Cincinnati Reds. I think they have enough of the prospects, and maybe they just don't want to give up that kind of player. But the White Sox are in the mode of doing that. That's why they've picked up all these players in the offseason, like former Cub great Mike Tauchman. He'll probably be playing a lot more than he expected to play because of injuries to Andrew Benintendi in spring training already. He's got a broken hand or a finger on his right hand, and he'll be missing up until the opening day. He thinks he'll be ready by then, but I know that the White Sox will want to take it slow and probably have him out after the season does start, maybe in the middle of April. And then you just got Austin Slater, who just was signed also this offseason for the White Sox, going to be a platoon guy, right fielder out there. He has some little oblique problems. So you'll get a lot more play from Mike Tauchman than you're supposed to. Mike Tauchman, I think if you ask any Cub fan, perfect in small doses. You play him too much, exposed. But that thing that man knows how to do is get on base. And that's what the White Sox and their young players need to learn from Mike Tauchman, is the art of having a good at bat, knowing what the pitcher is trying to do to you and counteract that with some of your strengths. And if you have a weakness, understand that pitcher is going to be trying to exploit that. So Mike Tauchman is a good pickup. So is Austin Slater. Also, the White Sox got Michael A. Taylor for a little backup as far as Luis Robert Jr. And if they ever do trade Luis Robert Jr., which I hope they do, that means that Luis Robert Jr. has had a strong first half and that teams are wanting to get him, because this is going to be a long process for the White Sox. This year will be probably another 100-loss year, as they lost 121 games last year. If they have a 22-game improvement, I'll be shocked because this roster is worse than the roster they started with at the beginning of 2024. Remember, they had Eric Fetty, and he pitched pretty well for the White Sox. And, of course, the offseason trade of Garrett Crochet came this past offseason. But Garrett Crochet in 2024 was the White Sox ace. And if he would have kept on pitching, I think he would have been in the battle for the Cy Young Award with Tarek Skubal, because he was just that good while he was doing his full 6-inning pitching stuff. So that trade did give a White Sox a lot of players coming back to them on the south side. But as far as the north side, besides the 2 guys you've already mentioned with Kyle Tucker and the closer Ryan Presley, any other offseason or spring notes that you want to get off and say, this is going to be a thing that you need to look at, Cub fans, for this year, because this is a make or break, or this is a vital thing for this 2025 Cubs season.
I don't think it's necessarily make or break, but Matt Shaw is, and what he's able to do this season is so important to the Cubs. It's not like, I don't want to put too big of expectations on a guy who's never touched or never played a Major League Baseball game, right? But like, third base is where it's going to be. And Matt Shaw was dealing with like an injury. He just played his first spring game on Sunday. So from the reports out of Arizona, he said, I think he believes he feels 100%. Feels like their Cubs are just working him back into full health. Obviously, that's the number one important thing. But getting him kind of used to that game atmosphere again, getting him in game shape. There's no clarity yet on if he'll play in Japan. Like, that's still on the table. He got a couple weeks, so it's definitely possible. But it feels like he should be ready to go when the Cubs go to Arizona, or come back and face the Diamondbacks in Arizona to open up the domestic part of the regular season schedule. But yeah, from all indications are that he's going to be, as long as he's healthy, the starting third baseman. Like, he'll at least get that first shot as long as he's healthy. And that feels like, well, yeah, I was gonna say that feels so important, because third base has been just a position that they couldn't find anyone to play that, or to fill that well enough to be the everyday third baseman over the last 2-3 years, right? You look at Patrick Wisdom was an option there a couple years ago, and Nick Madrigal, a couple years ago, tried to move him over. And to his credit, he had actually a pretty solid defensive season at third base, but he didn't really hit at the big league level. He just couldn't stay healthy. I believe he might be out for the season again this year.
With the Mets?
Something with his shoulder. Yeah, something with his shoulder, a shoulder injury. I think that's what I saw.
Wow.
But just injuries have been were an issue with him in a Cubs uniform. He got non-tendered this offseason. Christopher Morel, obviously, like the raw talent was there. He was electric on the field, off the field. He was a great personality, but he just wasn't a very good defensive third baseman. That experiment just didn't work out, and he ended up getting traded in that Isaac Paredes trade. And so that's kind of your rotation of third baseman the last few years. Miles Mascheroni was in there as well. Like, they've had different faces play that position, just haven't found that guy. And Matt Shaw, obviously the hope is that he can be that guy. He spent a lot of time the last 2 off seasons taking reps at third base. He has spent most of his time last year in the minor leagues was at third base, even though he came up as a middle infielder. Dansby Swanson, I mentioned him earlier, but he's the Cubs shortstop, and he signed through, was it 2020? He signed for a few more seasons, right? Like, he's going to be around for a little bit longer. Nico Horner, just Gold Glove second baseman. He signed through, I believe, the 2026 season. So he's still around for a little bit. Those middle infield spots weren't for Matt Shaw, or weren't going to be open for Matt Shaw unless a trade happened. Third base is open. He's going to get that shot. And if, I won't say he's going to be the player leading the Cubs to the playoffs, but him, doing well. You expect the rookie struggles. You expect some struggles from a guy coming up to the major league for the first time, but him doing well and starting to figure things out in the major leagues, that could go a long way towards helping the Cubs break this playoff streak or playoff drought and get back to the postseason. Like, that's a position the Cubs have been trying to figure out for years, and Matt Shaw looks like maybe he's the guy that's finally the answer there.
And I've waffled back and forth on the Alex Bregman to the Red Sox deal, as far as what blame, what congratulations do I give both the Red Sox and the Cubs. Initially, I was like, Cubs came in way late and came in way lower than what the Red Sox were. They were only willing to pay him about $29 million for 4 years, but he had more years than what the Red Sox had offered him. But the Red Sox paying him $40 million. I understand the hesitation to pay a player like Alex Bregman, who has declined slightly from his apex he had a couple of years ago. But in Boston, I guarantee those numbers, just like I was talking about with Isaac Paredes in Houston, that left field wall, the monster, will benefit him well, and the numbers will look inflated like they wouldn't look in Wrigley Field. Like, the conditions actually play to that, and the $40 million will seem like a good deal for the Boston Red Sox. Two things can be true. I think the Cubs came in under market value for what Alex Bregman is, but also the deal he eventually signed with the Red Sox was way too much for the Cubs' blood, and it wouldn't have been a good deal. And so I'm glad the Cubs are sticking with Matt Shaw and giving the kid, hopefully, a chance to wow you and allowing him to be a rookie. Let him mess up a lot. Let him just screw up. And I got it. It's a playoff year. You can't really afford these things, but you can't really afford having the bus go back and forth. You can't have him Chicago to Iowa, Chicago to Iowa.
Well, that's what having all these other guys is for, right? Like having the Ian Happ, having the Dansby Swanson, having the Nico Horner, having the Kyle Tucker, the guys that are pretty proven at the major league level at this point and can be those leaders on the team on and off the field, and allowing Matt Shaw to just be the rookie. Go through the struggles, go through the ups and downs, and start to figure things out at the major league level. That takes time. That's not something you just you get into it and you very rarely do guys come up and have immediate success and just stay that way. Very rarely that happens. So you should not expect Matt Shaw to be that guy, but you can expect him to have, to just continue to work through things and hopefully get to that level, even if it's by the end of the season where you feel really good about him at the major league level. Like Pete Crow Armstrong, I mentioned him earlier. That was him last year. I don't think he started the season. He didn't start the season with the Cubs. He debuted in 2023. Didn't start last year with the Cubs right away, but I think 3 weeks into the season was when he came back up. But you had you had Cody Bellinger. You had a lot of the guys that are on the roster now that the Cubs were trying to count on to lead them to the playoffs. But they were able to give Pete Crow Armstrong basically everyday playing time for months and let him, he's going to give you that value with the glove and with the base running, but they gave him that runway to figure things out offensively. And like I mentioned, the last 2 months of the season, he looked like a completely different hitter. There was a mechanical switch with a leg kick, but there was a lot of, I think that was part of it, but there was a lot of also just, figuring out the routines, the daily routine, how to get through the daily grind, the stuff that you have to learn as a Major League Baseball player that's different than anything you've done prior to hitting the big leagues. I think a lot of that had to do with what Pete Armstrong was able to figure out after the first few months of the season. And so that I think you can hope for the same thing for Matt Shaw, where he's giving you some value somehow. He's figuring out, big league pitching. He's figuring out the daily routine of being a big leaguer and how to, keep himself healthy, keep himself fresh, keep himself on the field, making plays on the field, but doing things the right way off the field as well. Like that's, I think, what you can hope for with Matt Shaw. And, if he goes out and he wins the Rookie of the Year this season, like that's huge. Again, you don't expect that, but that's a very huge outcome again to a team who kind of needs all hands on deck to make the postseason this season.
And that's the thing. I wish the White Sox were doing, like you just described, the Cubs did with Pete Crow Armstrong and what they might do this year with Matt Shaw. It seems like, and the offseason from Chris Getz, I thought was an overall success. You bring in one of the most valuable managers out there in Will Venable. Like he's been on the market for a couple years where people are like, that guy. If you ever get him under as the bench boss, you'll be going places. So getting that guy after having Pedro Grifol and his shenanigans for the last 2 years is a huge win. And getting Ryan Fuller as the hitting director for the White Sox and Walker McKinvin from the Brewers is a huge get. They're getting some more analytically based and newer guys who know things of modern baseball. So many years the White Sox have been so far behind, and we saw the piece last year by Britt Riholi on The Athletic where they're just talking about the White Sox antiquated ways, and now you can see young GM Chris Getz try to get the White Sox into the 2020s, just at the beginning, 2020. And now let's progress, eventually see if we can catch up with 2025 eventually, maybe next year. Yeah. But they're finally going with the flow of get some good people, smart people in the building. Chris Getz, you're new at this job, but you need to have people who know how to do the job. And Brian Bannister, who they picked up last year, and Josh Barfield, who they got last year from the D-backs, to help you along the way. But his offseason moves for the front office, outstanding. The players, I don't like him. Mike Tauchman, I've already talked about him. It's a A+ move. Same thing with Austin Slater. I thought picking up Michael A. Taylor when they did, I think they did in February, it's just too much. Like, we don't need Michael A. Taylor. And what you do and what you get back from Michael A. Taylor is not worth the 50 games you're going to play him this year for the White Sox, when you can be playing somebody else like Oscar Colas. He's still on the team. Like, if you don't believe in him, release him. But stop picking up all these extra 30-year-old dudes to play the time where Oscar Colas can get in those minutes. And you pick up the Josh Rojas's of the world, solid player. Just a real solid player. That's all he is. But Chase Mydroth just came over from the Red Sox in that trade for Garrett Crochet. You also have Kyle Teel, a catcher, who probably is blocked by a couple people right now, but I think he's ready for the major leagues this year. Braden Montgomery got drafted this past year. Hasn't played a minor league game because he was hurt in the College World Series. And so his first assignment will be probably in high A or double A this year for the White Sox. And he's probably a year or two away. And Wickelman Gonzalez, you got all these players, but Chase Mydroth is the one who's ready for Major League Baseball. He is what Nick Madrigal was promised to be for both the Cubs and the White Sox. Hit first guy. Doesn't hit for power, but will know how to get a hit and or get on base via the walk. And he is young enough where you can play him. I think he's in his 24, 25-year season. You can play him instead of the Josh Rojases of the world. I don't need to see Josh Rojas play. Give me 140 games of Chase Mydroth. Maybe after he learns how to play down in AAA this year at the beginning of the year, give me 100 games of Colson Montgomery at shortstop. I know he regressed last year, but this is the year to do the things that you need to do at the major league level. There's no pressure on these kids. It's probably the best time for a prospect to come up to a team because, yes, Colson Montgomery is a highly rated prospect. I think he's 39th in Just Baseball's prospects list. But he's not going to have pressure of, hey, you need to come up here and help this team win as a prospect that you just described with Matt Shaw. But Matt Shaw has a bunch of help. Kid, relax. You're just going to be a rookie there. We got you. We got the runs over here. With the White Sox, it's going to be like, yeah, you're a big-time prospect, but we're not counting on anybody doing anything here. You're here to learn at the major league level. Get these at-bats. Get the rookie mistakes out of the way in 2025 when there's zero expectations. So in 2026 and 2027, you're ready to roll. You're not going through the rookie stuff where the White Sox should be a little bit more competitive than they are this year. And then the pressure will be on rookies at that time. You put the rookies in this low-pressure situation and play them over the Austin Slaters of the world. Play them over Andrew Benintendi. I know he has 3 more years on his contract. Who cares? Play these youngsters over, and I know Andrew will miss the beginning of the season, but I need for the White Sox to commit to playing people who are part of their future, not playing these guys who are, hey, we can trade these guys, which we saw last year, Chris Getz. If you're going to be getting back only, what's his name? Miguel Vargas and a couple lottery tickets for giving up Eric Fetty and Tommy Pham and World Series champion Michael Kopech, then I'm not going to trust you in turning around Michael A. Taylor or getting something valuable for Austin Slater or Mike Tauchman going wherever he needs to go when July hits. So I am not very much on board with the player acquisitions the White Sox got. It seems like the same acquisitions they got last year in the Tommy Phams of the world. And current Cub minor leaguer, Chris Flexen, those type of guys. Like, those are just perfect for the Cubs. A guy in Iowa or making the rotation or making the bullpen, giving you innings. Perfect. I don't need that for the White Sox. I need youngsters winning or failing at the major league level so they can progress every single year, understand what they did, and then learn from those mistakes at the game, at the show, instead of learning these things in AAA. And then when it's really time to go, when the lights are on, then they falter because it's too big of a show, because the team now and the city now needs you to perform at a high level.
Yeah. So what's like a really like realistic, obviously, because like they're not Cubs or the White Sox aren't going to win the World Series next year. What's like a good realistic like end to the season for, like, when you look back and when is, I don't know when the last game is, the end of September, right? After the last game of the year. You look back at the season, like what do you need to see to be like, this was a good season for the White Sox? Is it just the development of the prospects? Like what makes this 2025 a good season for the White Sox when you're looking back on it in September?
As people who will listen to me on CHGO White Sox know, and people who will listen to me on Addison 35th podcast when we're talking about the White Sox, my favorite slogan, my favorite way of thinking about baseball, especially when you're young and in a rebuild like the White Sox are, it's process over results. So I'm not looking for the slash lines. I'm not looking for even the final record the White Sox will have, because I know it will be still disappointing. There's no amount of games they'll win, and I mean that. And people are like, well, what if they win 81? No, they won't. So they won't. There's no amount of wins that are going to be satisfying to me. Like, yeah, that team competed and got those wins. Those individual moments inside of those games where you see a team still grinding at bats, still thinking that, hey, we have a chance to win this game, instead of, I think the White Sox only won one game after the sixth inning where they were trailing in those times, like only one. And that tells me quit. Like, they didn't have talent as much as the other teams, but some of those teams they lost to last year are because they just had a quit mentality, kind of like how the Angels did. I don't know if anybody saw this. At the end of last year, the White Sox got to their 41 wins, due in part because the Angels quit. Absolutely quit at the end of the year. It was like the last week of the season, and I've never seen a team quit when the season's not completely over. Not individual players. The team quit. So that's the only reason White Sox won. That's 2 out of 3. And so at the end of the year, you see each of those games, for the most part, they competed. Yeah, they lost 10-0. Competing. Going down with the ship. If Paul Skeens is on, he's on. You just tip the cap. That's all you want. And so I just want the players, like I told you before, to get over 100 games in their system, young players, and see them go through their struggles. And then we'll analyze them every time we come on here on Addison to 35th, and we'll give them the grace that they deserve. But you're not going to see anything from Austin Slater that's going to get you anything excited about as a White Sox fan, because he's here for this year and this year only. And this year is only about those young players and how Will Venable and his staff develops them.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, if you're answering me the same question, like, again, like I look back and if it's the end of September, for me to call it a good season, a really good season for the Cubs, like I need to not be looking back at the end of September, right? I need to be looking at October and the Cubs continuing to play baseball into October. How deep it matters, but not as much as getting there. Like the Cubs need to be a playoff team in 2025. And I get, like, injuries can completely derail a team. You get your underperformances all the time. If you're relying on prospects, you're running the risk that, as the great Theo Epstein and Jed Hoyer say, like, progress isn't linear or development isn't linear, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Like, you run the risk of the young guys who aren't proven at the major league level maybe taking a step back or going through extended struggles or whatever that is. So I get all that. I get that things can happen that aren't necessarily in the control of, the front office that put this team together, the coaches, the coaching staff that works with the players, and the players themselves. Like, injuries and all that kind of stuff just happen. That's baseball. But, like, saying it right now still makes it kind of sound like it would be an excuse. There are obviously teams in baseball, and in the last few years, and there'll be teams this season. The best teams are the teams that, even when injuries do happen, they don't derail seasons. Right? Mm-hmm. Like the Dodgers, the Dodgers are a different story, but, like, they went through 1 million pitchers last season and won the World Series. Like, those are the teams, like the teams that put together those teams that have the depth to withstand injuries and all that kind of stuff. Like, those are the really good teams. I don't know that the Cubs are there yet. I don't know. I think they have good depth. I think they have a good team and they have solid depth. I don't think they have the kind of team where, like, and I'm going to knock on wood here. I'm not even going to say just one of their starting players, right? One of their starting position players, a guy who's supposed to be really good for him, hitting higher in the lineup, is on the field every day. One of those guys gets injured. I don't know that the Cubs specifically have the kind of, the depth to truly keep the ship from sinking, or like keep things on the right track. And that's also kind of like, that's also baseball. Like, obviously your bench players and your backups are not going to be as good as your starters, but I don't know if the Cubs have the depth. I don't know if they've proven to me that they have the depth right now that an injury to one of their bigger stars or one of their bigger players doesn't derail their season. So that's a long way of I'm going to go back to my original point of, like, when at the end of September, to call it a good season, I shouldn't be looking backwards at the season. I should be saying, like, oh, well, like give me a couple more weeks until the Cubs playoff run is done. Like, that's what I need to be saying, because the real expectations are that the Cubs are going to be, or need to be, a 2025 postseason team. Like, that's not an unfair expectation to put on this team after the last couple of years and after what they did this offseason. And that's what we need to be looking at end of September, beginning of October.
Yeah, and I'm in agreement. Like, this is a playoff team where you should win that first playoff series. Like, you should get to the actual division series. Like, I'm not even a Cub fan, but that should be bare minimum. Like, and I'm sure Cub fans believe they're LCS team. They should be an LCS team. If they don't get there, and if they get there, they lose to the Dodgers, so be it. But, they have the talent. But the thing I worry about from the outside is the 4 and 5. Like, Matthew Boyd hasn't pitched a lot in his life the last couple of years.
Last few years, at least, yeah.
And so, depending on him for 140 plus innings, even 100 innings, is a tall ask. I know he pitched well with the Guardians last year, but that's a tall ask. And then Colin Ray, like, solid, just as solid as you can come about. And like you were saying, injuries happen. They'll have other people in the rotation trying to give them innings, as I was alluding to earlier. Chris Flexen will be a valuable asset to the Cubs. I think that's a guy that's going to make the minor league club at minimum and then be in the majors a lot, because injuries do happen. But Colin Ray, a little long in the tooth, had a good year, is a solid player, but I'm thinking about playoff stuff and, like, fortifying that team, that starting rotation. Like, do you think Jed has enough powder dry to make a shot at the trade deadline for a top line starter that might be out there that the Cubs might be looking for?
I mean, I think they have the system. They have the guys in house that if they need to go trade for a top line starter, whatever the need is at the trade deadline, I think they have the ability to go and do it. But yeah, I mean, that is one of the concerns around this team, is that, that the addition of Matthew Boyd, the addition of Colin Ray can be solid. Like, Matthew Boyd, I think, I haven't watched his outings so far in spring training closely, but I believe he's looked pretty good. The reports that, he's talking to reporters and saying, he feels good. He feels good about where he's at. And then obviously moving forward, and you wouldn't expect him to say anything else, but I digress. He could be a pretty solid addition into that rotation. I wouldn't expect him to, like, jump Justin Steele or Shota Imanaga in the pecking order, but he could be a really good. I think what you saw with him in Cleveland towards the end of the season, when he did start pitching, some of the things he's done in the past, like, if he's healthy and on it, like, he could be a really good middle of the rotation arm for the Cubs. Colin Ray, like you said, has done a good job of eating innings and has the experience behind or playing under Craig Counsell for a couple seasons in Milwaukee. I think you'd look at him probably as, like, probably the leader and, like, who's going to be that fifth starter now that the reports that Javier Assad isn't going to be or is unlikely to be ready for the beginning of the season. I believe that's what Craig Counsell said over the weekend. Ben Brown and Jordan Wicks are also in that mix. But you're talking about guys who are back end guys. not necessarily full-time starters or you have prospects like Ben Brown and Jordan Wicks who did miss a lot of time last season. You don't know exactly what you're gonna get out of those guys. And I look at the offseason and what the Cubs could have done, some of the arms that were out there they could have added that were top of the rotation, if not number one or number two guys, right? You'd feel better about this rotation if the Cubs went and added one of those guys to go along with Steele and Imanaga and Jameson Tyone. Mm-hmm. They didn't. They added a couple guys that are going to fit in towards the bottom of the rotation or the back end of the rotation, and Colin Ray and Matthew Boyd. And maybe they solidify things back there, and Justin. Maybe they solidify things back there, but you were really counting on Shota Imanaga to have a good follow up to his rookie season. To not regress or to not have a worse season than he did last season. You're asking Steele to go out and be what he's been the last couple of seasons. Tyone to go and have another really good season versus what 2023 was for him. Like, you're asking a lot of the guys that are filling out that 1, 2, 3 to be really, really good again. And one of the things that has been talked about over the last few months was the way the conditions played at Wrigley and how they kind of hurt hitters. And it's fair. It's a fair point to make. But at the same time, it also helped Cubs pitchers, and especially when you're talking about rotation guys. So if things are to go more middle, the environment, the weather to go regress towards the mean and be more middle of the pack, like, could you also expect the Cubs pitchers to maybe not perform as well? Like that's a concern. And so the Cubs or Jed Hoyer not going out and getting a Corbin Burns or someone to plug near or at the top of the rotation, you're running a risk. You're asking a lot of the guys that are already there at the top of the rotation, some of these guys that you brought in to fill in the bottom of the rotation, and some of the young guys that missed a lot of time last year to injury. It's a risk, and perhaps they go out and have another combined really good season. The rotation had a really good year last year, but it's not unfair to say it's a concern. It's maybe the bigger concern for the Cubs or of any position group on the Cubs right now. And, they're going to need them to perform this season, obviously.
Thank you guys for joining us again. And we'll get you wrapped up here. Usually we'll have individual shows. So I'll be doing the White Sox stuff exclusively on this channel, Addison to 35th, and Ryan Herrera will be doing exclusively Cubs stuff. So in the spirit of that, we want to end this show, since it'll be one of our last until we meet up for the Cubs Sox series, unless there's a trade of a Cubs Sox player. We'll do a joint show every once in a while. But since I have you here, Ryan, and won't have you here when the White Sox season starts, can you give me a bold prediction for this 2025 White Sox club, a player, what's going to happen in the season, whatever you have here? And I'll give you the same, I think, about the Cubs after your answer.
There you go. My bold prediction: the White Sox lose less than 100 games this year. They're gonna make that march to 63. Oof. They're gonna get there. No, I mean, like you explained it. Like they've added a few guys that you're just kind of like, what's the point in adding? The veteran players or journeyman guys. They're like, They do have a lot of really solid prospects. I think how many are on some of these lists? Like 5, 6 White Sox prospects. I know they're not all close to major league ready, but a few of them are. It is hard to lose 100 games. It's obviously hard to lose 121. It's hard to lose 100 games. Maybe the White Sox, again, bold prediction, the White Sox are going to have a 22-game improvement at least. Still going to lose at least 99 or at most 99 games, but they won't hit that triple digits again. I'm for your sake, Herb, I'm going to say the Cubs or the White Sox lose less than 100 games.
All right. And I'm going to go for a couple here. And I'm just bullish on this Cubs year. Like, I think that they, yes, could have done more in the offseason, but understood, as I told you before, what Jed and Carter were thinking in not signing a player like Alex Bregman. I also wanted them to make some bids for Garrett Crochet, a little bit more serious bids, and end up with him because, like I said before, that starting rotation would have filled out so well with Garrett Crochet sliding in there ahead of Shota, ahead of Justin Steele, ahead of other players. I forgot the guy's name now. So I will
Tyone?
Jameson Tyone.
Yeah.
I will take this prediction as the Cubs, of course, are going to win the division. In my estimation, they're going to win 95 games. The reason why they win 95 games, mostly, like a good portion of that, will go to National League MVP Kyle Tucker. It is his walk year. He's in a new stadium. He's going to be leading the Cubs back to the division title that they haven't won in over 5 years, or 5 seasons. They will go wild for Kyle Tucker because I think he's going to have an outstanding 7 to 8 to 9 win season war-wise. And he's just going to set the tone for his free agent market next year and try to eliminate whatever doubts a $400 $500 million contract that folks have out there right now. He wants to make his money, and this is the way in the biggest stage, and one of the biggest stages in baseball in Chicago with the Cubs, to actually make your mark. As you're a Cub winner and you perform as a Cub, the nation looks on and the nation gives you hype. So Kyle Tucker understands that this year is his biggest year in his major league career. It sets him up for a lifetime of generational wealth. I know he already has a lot of money, but 500 million works forever. And so I think, maybe not money doesn't motivate him, but anybody would be motivated by a big time payout where you could take care of your family for life. And so, I think he's going to have an outstanding year, and he's going to be National League MVP. Yes, over Ohtani,
over Soto, over Ohtani, over all those guys.
Yes.
If Kyle Tucker wins National League Most Valuable Player, the Cubs should be looking at a really good season. If they have an MVP on their team, they should be looking at a really, really good season overall. So, hey man, like it's to any Cubs fans listening right now, like that was music to their ears, and I'm sure they're happy you said that.
I've wanted him on the White Sox for years. Of course, I knew he would never get here, but I'm glad he's in the town that I live in and I watch baseball in. I think he's a superstar. Everybody who knows him, like every time the White Sox played him and Jordan Alvarez would just terrorize us, like kill us. Like there's no beating that guy when he's on, when he's like healthy. He's such a valuable player, not just with the bat, with the glove, with the base running. He's a ultimate player, and I love him. I love the game, and I'm sad the White Sox will never get him, but I'm glad he'll be in my town. So with that, I got to say goodbye for Addison the 35th inaugural episode. It was just such a fun time to talk baseball again. I told you, just because the White Sox are bad, we will have an enjoyable time talking these games with you on my versions of Addison the 35th, and I'm sure Ryan Herrera will be talking some great times with the Cubs 2025 season coming up, and it's going to be a great year. I'm not jinxing or anything. I think the Cubs are genuinely a good team, and if they can do some things in the playoffs, it's a team that can go to the LCS, and I think they can have some good times this year in 2025. So, Ryan, do you have anything you want to say, parting, before we wrap up this episode?
Just ask the folks listening or watching, like if you're on YouTube, like, subscribe, leave a comment. If you're listening on your favorite podcast platform, follow it, download our show, subscribe, do all that good stuff, leave a review. We're trying to build this thing. This is the inaugural episode. This is episode number 1, but we want to make this big. We want to make this a really cool thing for Cubs fans and Sox fans to come and listen to us and just interact with us. Some of our shows will be live, some of them will be pre-recorded, but we're always going to be available to interact with on social media and all that stuff. So follow. If you're watching on YouTube right now, you got our handles on there. Ecknerwall23 for her, Ryan _A_ Herrera for me. But follow us on Twitter or any other social media platform. Like, we'll post updates on when shows are coming out, again, of individual Cubs, individual Sox episodes. But when those come out, we'll keep you updated. We'll give you, turn notifications on, do all that good stuff, and join this ride with us, man, because I'm excited for it.
Very much so. Great words there, Ryan. And we are on the Just Baseball Network here on Addison the 35th. So we were going to thank those great folks there. Yeah, I want to talk about Aram. What is so great. Jack was awesome, still leading us while he's doing his stuff down there in Miami. And of course, our guy Elijah Evans, who has helped us out tremendously getting this show off the ground. So for Ryan Herrera, you follow him on Twitter, Ryan_A_Herrera. Me, Herb Lawrence, Ecknerwall23. That is Lawrence, my last name, spelled backwards. And 2-3, you know that's 4. No, not him. Robin Ventura. So for Ryan, it's Herb. Thank you for joining us here on Addison to 35th.